I have to do is thank you guys for being here. I know that one of the times in the semester we see peak absenteeism usually is this day. So thank you for being here. What I normally do on this day is make sure that you pay attention to some of the things we talk about, because they often show up as bonus questions on the next test. That is your reward for being here today when you could choose not to be here. So guys, the film discussion is technically due today, but because of the snafus we had last week with some people not realizing the class was canceled, I did give everybody a bit of an extension on that. I want this to be 10 easy points for everybody. The only way I'm counting this grade toward mid-semester is if everybody gets it done by the time I leave today. If not, you still have an easy 10 points when you get back. Don't sweat it. I think the film is really good, but show of hands, how many of you have watched it already? Any thoughts without giving spoilers? I mean, it's not like it's got a plot, but yes.
I mean, it's a little bit of a spoiler, but I was just surprised at the amount at which they collect data. Like, I know the one lady said if she were just to print out this, like the information that Amazon sent her, it would come up to 15,000 pages just for surfing on one year and not even always finding stuff, just clicking where she logged in. I thought that was like, kind of insane.
It's pretty crazy, and I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but Amazon, to my knowledge, hardly ever logs you out. If you get back into a browser you've been in, you're logged in. I mean, even Facebook logs you out once in a while, but Amazon really doesn't seem to do that all that often. Any other thoughts on the film so far? Anybody else find it interesting or surprising? Yes.
I found it interesting what it's doing to the economy, like in Seattle, with how it's like kind of skyrocketed, like prices of living, and how it's like pushing a lot of people out. Like people who build the Amazon building can't even afford to live there because their wage doesn't cover the cost of living.
They are giving out free bananas, so they're making it up for that. Amazon is giving out bananas, which I thought that was kind of like strange.
Yeah, what was that about? Like, why do they do that?
It was almost like you had to pick off the list. Well, we better do something to show that we're giving back. Oh, I know. How about some produce?
I thought it was so they didn't have to pay taxes.
That's what I
probably.
thought. I didn't understand it.
It's been so long since I've watched it, but that's probably what it was. I thought it was interesting, too, because the documentary was made by a company out of Germany that does a lot of investigative journalism. So they really didn't have a pro-U.S. bias. If anything, maybe a little anti-U.S. or anti-capitalism bias from the tone of the reporters. You have to read between the lines on that. Regardless, I think it made some pretty good points about data collection. Guys, we're going to start off today's conversation, however, because everybody's talking about coronavirus. Guys, it's a big deal. I'm going to start off with a little clip from CNBC, a recent clip about how this is affecting supply chain management. We're going to have a little discussion about what this is doing in terms of disrupting business, including the effect this virus is having on its company. Why is the coronavirus so disruptive to the way our economy is structured right now? Yes? Yeah, we're talking about factories that have been gradually closing, people who are not going to work on a daily basis. And the very fact that we've got such a diverse supply chain means this stuff is coming from everywhere. We're really talking about business-to-business effects here. Did you catch when they asked him the question, how have you tried to diversify your supply chain because of China being such a vulnerable area right now? Did you catch what his answer was? What did he say? Yes?
They moved things to Taiwan.
Yeah, and basically it didn't seem like it really helped very much, did it? Because you go to Taiwan, they're still getting a lot of their supply from China, and it's still the same general region of the world. Something very similar happened, guys, back in 2011. I don't know if any of you remember the tsunami of 2011 or read about it. What happened was there was a tsunami in Japan, and it caused a lot of disruptions because Japan's a small island country, and they rely heavily on atomic power. Well, it hit the reactors as well. You may say to yourself, well, how does that affect us here in the United States? During that period of time, if you owned a Subaru, anybody here drive a Subaru? You couldn't get parts for a Subaru because even though a lot of those cars are made here, some of the parts still come from Japan. If you're ordering a Ford F-150, you couldn't get it in specific shades of black because the minerals that went into certain types of black paint came from Japan. And even parts for our iPads we couldn't get. So we had a backlog in terms of orders for things like that. How's this going to play out in the long run? I don't know, but I think that one of the points that this person made about his company, he said they use lean manufacturing. Has anybody heard that term before? What does it mean? say lean manufacturing. Any thoughts? Yes. Exactly right. Let's say, for example, I have a company. E-commerce is wonderful for this purpose because we don't have to keep big piles of inventory sitting around because we know our ordering habits, we know what our customers typically buy, and we order stuff when we need it because warehouses cost money. Storing stuff costs money. Really, when you have something that's assembled or a part that's sitting in a warehouse collecting dust, you're losing money every day that it sits there. And so the idea of lean manufacturing relies on things like just-in-time ordering, and this coronavirus is disrupting all of that. What else is this coronavirus disrupting in terms of the world of business, guys? Anybody been paying attention to what's happening in the markets the last couple of days? Oh, man, we're seeing catastrophic drops. I think, what was it, a 30% drop in value we saw in the S&P yesterday. Guys, that's huge. That's like, I'm not saying we're not going to rebound from it because I think we are. But the biggest issues with this particular virus, it's going to take us months to get back up to production levels after we get the all clear to start doing more trade and more business with these organizations. So we're going to feel the ripples of this for some time to come. Any other thoughts, guys? Because I also think that social networking is playing a role in this. My personal feeling, even though I'm not a doctor or a medical professional, I think that a lot of the fears of the coronavirus are getting hyped up because of things like social media. This is an extreme version of something like the flu, and I'm not saying it's not terrible that some people are dying from it. There are. But we're not talking pandemic types deaths. The Black Plague is not loose on the streets of China. So I think we are making it worse ourselves. Yes?
Do you think China, I've heard stories that China's like kind of hiding how many like the death toll, they're not releasing all the information about it.
I think that's probably true too. I mean, they maintain a tight control, and anybody who said anything negative about their government in terms of how they're handling the illness, they've been put in jail or silenced. Same token, these guys built a hospital, like an entire hospital in Beijing in 10 days. They built a hospital in 10 days. It's crazy to comprehend. Other thoughts? But I agree with you. I think they aren't reporting the whole story. Anybody frightened about this at all? I'm not going to China anytime soon. I will tell you that. But I think that it's going to be less bad than maybe we think it is in the long run. Guys, before we get in for today, because I do know that you guys were here on the last day before break, and I know that everybody's tired. Raise your hand if you were ready for break. Like we're all kind of there. So we're going to be doing frequent. Both hands up. I love it. We're going to be doing frequent breaks during our time together today, and I put a couple of activities in here. Some are trivia. Some might be a little game. I mean, hopefully you find it entertaining. I try to think how we can make this class better for you today, because some of the information we're presenting is going to be pretty linear. Guys, first up, when we start talking about web servers can be hardware or they can be software. That term applies to both, but when we start talking about web server software, and we look at the leading groups that are providing these kinds of services, the two biggest web server software packages are Apache and Microsoft IIS. Now, there are other versions out there. And again, this isn't a computer science course, but we've got Unix and Linux that are very, very similar, actually, in the way they're created. And Apache, at some level, was actually based on Unix and Linux, Unix being one of the older operating systems. Microsoft IIS is very popular as well. For anybody in here, I will lean on my computer science type people in here. Why is Microsoft IIS so popular at times, even though Linux is free? Why do people like IIS so much? Because it looks like Windows and everybody's familiar with it. The difference is you've got to pay for it. Now, the thing is with Linux, when Linux was first unleashed on the world, anybody could download it for free and install it, but if you wanted support, you had to pay for it. So there are varying parts of this. If I ask you who the two biggest manufacturers of web servers are, with the biggest brands, you're going to tell me it's Apache and IIS. Now, when we talk about what does a web server do in the first place, the most fundamental thing a web server does is process requests. People are trying to hit your page. That's the main thing a web server does, is basically put up the page for people. It also can manage our security, which we're going to talk about in a coming chapter. File transfer protocol, if you're doing FTP, if you're transferring files from one computer to another. You also want to make sure, for example, the text that you're putting on your pages shows up in search engines like Google, but you also want to make sure you've got a search engine for your site. Why is that so important to have a search engine present on any website? Yes.
can't find what you're looking for, you can search the website.
Exactly right. And there are times that the drop-down menus and other ways we navigate aren't as efficient as just having a search function. I get so frustrated repeatedly when I get on my Francis for how bad the search function is. I can't find anything. Shit. Raise your hand if you feel my pain. All I want is a back button, too. All I want is to be able to go back. Like, seriously, if we get some big donor, they donate like $500 million to St. Francis, and they're like, we want to do something for Tonkin because he gave us a bad joke on occasion and he liked his Batman class. The very first thing I want is a big yellow oval on this building, a big Batman logo. But the second thing I want is a back button on my Francis. I want people to go back and say, you know, we didn't have a back button before that one rich student like Tonkin. We're going to give Tonkin a medal for this. Data capture. Again, we talked about Amazon. Your site should be capturing demographic data, login data, usage data. Amazon is a killer at this. We want to know what our customers are doing. You may also have an email server. Guys, I know that, for example, all of us have Gmail these days, but there still is something to that branded email. If you've got @Amazon.com in your email address, that's pretty prestigious. It says something about the company you keep. And again, in terms of our site management tools, we want to be able to go in and do diagnostics. We want to be able to see statistics about our site. Things that Google Analytics has packaged for us, and we're going to be diving into that after the break, should be present in any web server software. We should be able to see all those things. In terms of some of the site management tools that are built into any kind of web server we're using, we want to make sure our links work. We want to make sure if there's files that are hanging out there that don't show up on directories, that we can't search for, that we get rid of them. We can also use things like analytics packages. I know our text loves to talk about web trends and other brands. Who are most people using for their analytics at this point?
Google Analytics.
Google Analytics. Jill, why is everybody using Google Analytics?
I think it's free for the most part, and it's really easy to use.
It's free, it's easy, and it works well. One of the exercises we're going to be doing when we get into a little of our discussion about analytics, check this out. If you want to play with Google Analytics and you don't have your own website, Google will let you play with their analytics for their merch page. So you can actually get in and mess around to see who's buying what, who's buying Google mugs, who's buying t-shirts, where are they coming from, what web browsers they're using, how much time they're spending on the site. That's all information we want to know. So, but you can use third-party monitoring stuff for your analytics, or you can use stuff that's built into these operating systems. Again, it's the main purposes. Now, we also, if we're doing a lot of e-commerce in rapid-fire fashion, and we're doing something like dynamic page generation. Who here can give me an example? When I say dynamic page generation, what am I talking about? Let's say we're all shopping on Amazon.com. Does Brady's page look the same as mine when we log in? You probably have way cooler music on your front page than I have on mine, more current stuff. I guarantee Jill, I would say, would have an interesting front page on Amazon because she's got a wide variety of interests. Ryan's probably reading a lot of technical books and things that are going to make him even smarter than he already is. And Hunter's, I guarantee, is very creative. Our pages tell a lot about us. Well, that's why Amazon wants those pages to be automatically created. I bet all you guys have cool stuff on your pages, but it means that we're using something to do that. Whether you're using something like ASP or whichever coding you're using for this, it's great to have dynamic page generation. Number one, because we don't have to manually create pages. Number two, we can make sure people are being catered to in terms of what their interests are. And number three, and this is the big one, in terms of our content management system and our CRM, or customer relationship management, we've got a very consumer-oriented relationship with people. And then we get into what we refer to as application servers, guys. And that means, for example, you might have specific applications on your website. One of the biggest ones we talk about right now is video. Video is very processor intense and it's very bandwidth intense, which means you may want to have a specific server separate from your web server that just feeds up media files. Guys, these days when people create websites and get active on social media, where do we all put our video content? If you wanted to do something video online, where would you host it? They'll do it on YouTube. Absolutely correct. And why do we? It's free and it works well. And the reason it works well is because it's Google. And Google has more processing power probably than anybody in the world. Maybe Amazon comes close, but probably not. So it's a very intense process and you want a dedicated server. That's why so many people are putting their videos on YouTube these days. But in addition, for example, if you're Amazon, you're going to have dedicated database servers. You're going to have dedicated servers for every major function you do on your website. You do that to kind of differentiate between the main web server and applications, because your applications have to stay up and running. If you're not selling stuff, if you don't have a commerce application running, you're not making money. That being said, we're up for our first break of our lesson today. And here's our trivia break, guys. Which number comes closest to Amazon's total revenue for last year by estimates? Was it 150 billion? Was it 190 billion? Was it 250 billion? Or was it 280 billion? What do you think? So we got a guess for C. We have any other guesses? We got a guess for D. Any other guesses, guys? Do you think those are pretty good? Because I think they're pretty good. It's actually D. $280 billion in revenue for 2019. And by the way, they had the biggest record-breaking fourth quarter that they've ever had in terms of percentage of growth. It's a good time to be a part of Amazon. Wait till you see what we do for our next breaks, guys. Questions so far, by the way? Questions or comments? Because we're moving quickly to get through some of this material, but we want to keep it at least somewhat with you guys today. Okay, guys, in terms of whatever you're doing with your e-commerce platform, whether you are buying it from somebody else, i.e. you're going to somebody like Wix and saying we're going to use your e-commerce package, we're going to go to GoDaddy and set up a point-and-click kind of site, or we're building it ourselves, you can use what we refer to as merchant server software. There are many packages you can download or lease a software as a service. What are the basic things we need to do? Well, we need to, if we're selling physical goods and services, we got to have some kind of online catalog. We got to be able to see what you're selling. You got to have some way to actually buy stuff. So you need a shopping cart and a way to process credit cards. And as we mentioned in the last class, guys, a lot of people tend to sub out this function, the credit card processing. Why? Why would we sub that out instead of doing it ourselves? Please. So it could be bandwidth intensive for sure. Is there a second reason?
Did you say security?
Yeah, security infrastructure.
Yep. And liability. So we got security because we don't want people getting hacked. We also don't want to be held accountable for them as well. So again, usually these two things work together. If you raise your hand if you've ever seen on a website, this site is VeriSite certified. It's kind of an older standard now because so many people are just subbing this stuff out, not even publishing it. But it just means you've got somebody else managing your security and verifying it for you. And in terms of some of the other features, for example, you might even use a software package that integrates all of these things right in one suite of software. IBM sells this stuff. They call it merchant server software packages, depending on who you're going to. For example, Yahoo has a small business solution that's all online. IBM, you can buy their software, they call it WebSphere, and then you can even go up to enterprise level. Guys, the bottom line is whether you're building it yourself or whether you're pointing and clicking, the functions really are pretty similar in terms of what you would ultimately want to do. The way you're going to decide whether or not you're going with a high-end, a middle-end, or a low-end package, or if you're buying this as a service. Number one, what kind of functionality? How intense is your buying and selling experience? Say, for example, I own a guitar store in Crescent, Pennsylvania, and I maybe sell 6 guitars a week. Yahoo might fit my needs perfectly fine. Wix may fit my needs perfectly fine. What about your support for your different business models? This is one where I'll give a shout out to GoDaddy. They're automatically scaling their sites now to look good on mobile platforms. A lot of hosting companies are doing that as a value-added feature if you use, for example, their web creation tools. In terms of business process modeling, can we go through and actually look at your transaction process and the way customers go through your site to be able to determine if it's optimal? What about, for example, site management? A lot of people are not web developers who manage e-commerce, so can you do it point and click? And again, if we get into other things like global multicultural capability and the idea of having a purchasing package that will also keep track of things like sales tax and those sorts of things. All right. Here's our next stress break, guys. We're playing a game today called Truth or Dare. So who's up first? Because whoever volunteers, if you do it, I'll do it. So who wants to play Truth or Dare for our first contestant of the day? That's how much I know this is hard for you guys to be here today. Do I have somebody who's willing to play truth or dare? Truth or dare?
There.
Dare. I dare you to come to the front of this room and sing your favorite song.
Despacito. Of course. I'm just gonna do this. You guys spell it down. Despacito, quiero respirar tu cuello despacito. Quiero que me digas cosas al oído para que te acuerdes si no estás conmigo. Despacito.
Yes!
Well, I'm taking it back. I'm taking a dare. Has to be legal.
Has to be.
Something won't get me fired.
I dare you to give us all 5 bonus points.
Oh, come on. No. That's yeah. It has to be something that's risky for me. That's not risky. That's easy. I'm a bass player. You don't want to hear me sing.
I'm a bass player.
So cool people play bass.
Yeah, I actually want to hear you singing too.
Let me see what song could I sing for you guys today. I'm trying to think of one that you guys even know. Okay, do you guys like the 80s?
Sure.
All right, how about Don't Stop Believing, Hold On to the Feeling, Streetlight People, oh! How about that?
That was great.
All right.
Pretty impressive.
Now we get. I'm not a good singer. There's a reason. I got a face for radio and a voice for playing bass. You guys, in terms of choosing hardware, this is where we get into some of the stuff with scaling, guys. What we're talking about here, basically, with hardware is what does all this stuff live on? We've got operating systems, we've got servers, we've got applications, and they have to live somewhere. You want to make sure that you have enough hardware to support your software. What is the ultimate heart of any computer? We say this is the part that makes this computer's heart beat. What am I talking about? We're talking about the CPU, the processor. And then we also talk about the RAM. How much random access memory is available to you to make that server run quickly. So we need to have enough computing capability for peak demand. Our text says it well. Peak demand without wasting money. We want to build our servers robust enough so they can deal with everything that gets thrown at them without overbuilding them to the point where we're just throwing money at a problem. Who here has ever tried to buy concert tickets and been shut down because the site crashed? Isn't that the most frustrating thing in the world? That's why Ticketmaster sucks so bad. They don't care about this stuff because they're a monopoly. You need to think about whatever is going to go into your site that necessitates this hardware and speed. Well, again, how many people are going to hit your site at one point in time? This is the single biggest thing that crashes sites. Too many people trying to hit the site at the same time and either not having adequate bandwidth, which is not a hardware issue, or not having enough CPU speed. For example, you might know, for example, if you are hosting on somebody like Amazon, that you can bulk your capacity at certain times. They'll basically ramp you up if you're hosting with them so you can make sure you can handle multiple requests. Well, what about the nature of requests? Are these people just viewing web pages, or are they actually logging on? What about the type of content? If we're getting onto a static web page, once Ryan loads it on his computer, the rest of our computers will load very quickly if it's a static web page and we're all going to the same place because it gets cached locally on the internet. If we are doing dynamic pages, it can cost us more. Security adds processing and bandwidth concerns. Here's the best way to look at it, guys. If I went to this door and this door is open, all I have to do is twist the handle and I can open the door. It takes very little processing power, flip my wrist, and I'm out. If I had this door locked and a padlock here, I have to go here, twist the lock, undo the lock, and maybe undo the chain. Although that doesn't seem like much exertion, if we had several hundred people who were doing that same thing, it's taking more processing out of the computer to deal with more people logging on and dealing with more security. Security always slows things down, whether it's in an airport or logging into a website. We also have to look, for example, number of items in the inventory. If you get to a site that has lots of things to search, It's going to take more time and more processing power to go through those databases. And then we get in finally to speed of legacy applications. One of the reasons that our intranet, myfrancis.edu, is so slow is because it's using some computing applications that are in cases even decades old and are still trying to work with modern components. That's what we call a legacy application. Guys, there are plenty of companies out there that are using databases that are 20 and 30 years old, hopefully not on the same hardware, but sometimes the applications don't work as well with modern applications. When we start talking about something being scalable, it means can we make it bigger, stronger, and more powerful as we need to? Can we boost up our capability? So we've got a couple of ways we can do this. I mentioned in the last class vertical. If I've got a gaming machine, if I got a gaming box, how can I make that thing faster and hotter? What can I do? I can upgrade the CPU, absolutely. What else could I do? Put a better cooling fan on so it runs nice and cool. I can upgrade the RAM. I can put a better video processor in there. I can do all those things. But at some point, I'm throwing more money into a box that's going to be limited. So the more vertical you go, sooner or later you run out of space. When you go horizontally, it means you're splitting your functions over multiple computers. Larger companies tend to go horizontal. I guarantee you, if you go to Google, if you go to Amazon, or even a larger local company, they're going to separate those functions. Why would they do that? In addition to the fact they can make it more powerful, why would they do that? Why would we want to separate our functions on multiple machines? You don't need a computer science background to figure this one out. Let's say, for example, I've got a web server, a database server, and what else do I have? An email server and a media server. I got my web server that's running just fine, and my e-commerce server just went down. What can I do on my web server now to let my customers know? Exactly. I can at least stay operating and let people know there's a problem. If all these things are operating on one box and that box goes down, I've just lost everything. So it's a way that we can do things like let people know there's a problem. We can also do things like redundancy and mirroring. Has anybody ever done that in their comp sci classes, for example? The idea of having multiple backups or multiple components. For example, if you are a large company, you've got multiple servers that are mirroring each other. We used to call them RAID arrays. Have any of you guys ever seen a RAID array in a large server room, for example? If you walk into one of these, literally, there are racks of servers. And you can walk in and grab a drive out while that computer is running and not stop anything else because it's being mirrored on all the other drives. And we do the same thing with applications and servers. Has anybody, for example, ever gone on YouTube and it wouldn't load and 2 seconds later it would? Behind the scenes, something may have happened. There may have been a failure on one of Google's sites. And all of a sudden, it picks right back up because they've got redundancy. You can do that when you scale horizontally. Here's the other part we talked about. This gets a little into computer science right now. You can also technically do multiple operating systems, as we talked about virtual servers, which could be considered vertical or horizontal scaling, depending how you look at it. Generally speaking, if you remember this, upgrading individual components on one machine is vertical. Going out over multiple machines is horizontal. That makes sense, guys? Okay, excellent. All right, time for our next trivia break, guys. Which is the tallest building in the U.S.? Is it the Empire State Building, One World Trade Center, Comcast Technology Center in Philly, or the Willis Tower in Chicago? So we got to vote for the Willis Tower. Anybody else have a vote? If you voted for the Willis Tower, you are incorrect. It's One World Trade Center, although Willis Tower was the tallest building for a period of time. Anybody know what the Willis Tower used to be called? It used to be the Sears Tower before Sears shit the bed. And so now it's the Willis Tower. By the way, has anybody ever been to the Willis Tower to see what it's like to walk out over the glass? Who's been to Chicago? If you go to the Willis Tower, there's a section, it's a corner of the building, the floor is glass. And you can walk out in an overhang near the top of the building and look down and see completely down beneath. Who here could do that? Well, somebody was on it a few weeks ago and the glass started to crack. Now, keep in mind, it was cracking in a way that was a visible crack, was not a safety concern. I think at that point, if you're losing all control of your bodily functions, it's probably an acceptable response. And who here has ever heard of Kinsua State Park? The Sky Bridge. They actually have a place in northern Pennsylvania where it was at one point the highest elevated railroad bridge in the United States. And when half of it got knocked down by a tornado back in the 80s, it turned the rest of it into an observatory. And they have a piece of like 1 foot thick glass you can walk and stand on as well and look straight down into the valley. I've done it, and I'm not afraid of heights, but it messes with you big time. So, all right, let us continue, guys. So in terms of vertical and horizontal scaling techniques, we have ways you can do this. For example, you can use a faster computer, and that can be actually vertical or horizontal, but it's generally considered to be a vertical technique. You upgrade the CPU. If you create a cluster of computers, that's horizontal. You're going wide. If you're using what we refer to as appliance servers, those are dedicated media servers. That's horizontal as well. If we're batching requests, meaning processing as a group, that could be vertical or horizontal depending on how you handle it. Any of these things can be deployed to help us. Caching data can be used regardless of how we do it. But when we say the term caching, how many of you know what that means? What does caching mean? Yeah, so we're caching it, we're storing it locally. There's a reason why the sites you visit frequently load quickly on your computer. It's not just because your internet's that fast. It's because they're already locally in your RAM, in your computer, in your temporary memory. And that's a way that we make things more quickly as well. So here are some ways that we can actually improve our total processing, make things work better. If we separate static and dynamic content, the things that are going to load no matter what. If you notice when you log on to Amazon, the frame around Amazon loads immediately. That's cacheable content because it's technically static. That loads more quickly. The dynamic content can be left to use up our CPU cycles, can be used using our bandwidth, for example. Anything you can do to clear up your code, for example, and to make your logical and physical architecture more linear and to remove barriers is going to make the processing more quick on your site. So some of the other things too, guys, that we can also put in here. These are things we're going to be talking about when we get into SEO. By the way, guys, we have a guy who's going to be coming into class probably first part of March. His name is Jay Mall. And if you don't know Jay, he's an SEO expert. And he's going to be coming in here to show you how to be better at search engine optimization. But without even worrying about what's on that screen, how can you make sure your site comes up in Google searches more often? Yes?
There's actually like a form you have to fill out with Google, and then you do that and you send it back to them, and then they help you. And there's also a piece of code that Google sends you for that form, and you put that in your website.
So it kind of like sets up a, for lack of a better term, you kind of registered with Google.
Yeah.
You can certainly do that, and that certainly helps. Are there other ways you could optimize your site, even if you weren't working with Google? Specific terminology. For example, if we have places get in trouble, for example, if you go to anywhere in the United States, just about any town, and there was a pizza place, who's it always going to be named after? What's the most common name for pizza places? Is it either going to be Mario or Tony? You go anywhere, there's a Tony's Pizza in like almost every town in the United States. Just like there's an OIP in every town in the United States, or there's a McDonald's in every town in the United States. But there's not a Ryan's Pizza just everywhere. There's not a Tonkin's Tower of Pizza just anywhere. Anytime you can make your verbiage more specific, that's another way. What are other ways you can make yourself come up in Google more frequently? Any ideas?
You have it on there, but like the meta tags, like the metadata.
Mm-hmm. Why else are meta tags important too? Is there another reason why, besides search engine optimization, why meta tags are a good idea? And it's a tricky question, so don't feel bad if you don't get it. Have you ever seen somebody who is visually impaired using a computer? Meta tags help them navigate pages so they know what the image is supposed to be. That's one of the big reasons we start talking about accessibility. We use meta tags as well. So, but you guys are all right. You're naming the right things. So any specific information we can give. When they say offer expertise, I take that as linking to credible sites. In terms of buying ads and even getting into your local e-commerce, i.e. Things like not geocaching, but geofencing. can help us as well. These are all things you can start doing when you optimize your site. These are the things that really annoy people on web pages. Anytime you've got to log in to see something, for example, there are certain pages that really are pushing for this right now. I remember one of the ones I heard a lot of complaints about. I'm not a user personally, but people would get really ticked off at Pinterest, requiring you to log on to see things, for example. Pop-ups. Everybody's using a pop-up blocker these days. If it takes you more than 2 clicks on the site to get close to where you want to go, it annoys people. Not having a search function annoys people. Old content. Guys, when we go to our favorite pages, will somebody tell me a non-shopping page, an informational page that they go to every day? Reddit. And so if you went to Reddit 2 days in a row and the content hadn't been updated and the things you're interested in, would you be annoyed? Yeah, me too. Who else has a page they go to every day that's not shopping? Yes? And I bet it's updated multiple times per day. We love that stuff. I go to Car and Driver because I love cars. And when I get 2 days in a row and the main article is the same, I get annoyed too. So anytime we can update our content, it works really well for us. Guys, some of the other things that annoy people too, speaking of myfrancis.edu, the inability to actually use the back button. Anytime we have typographical errors, for example, that's always bad because it takes away from our credibility. Stuff that's unnecessary. Amazon's the perfect example. The utility works wonders. Things that are unnecessary on e-commerce pages just annoy people. So here's how we're going to end our class today, because I'm going to reward you for your patience today and being here and your diligence. We're going to go around the room. I'm going to ask everybody in this room to tell me one thing that really annoys them. It doesn't even have to be about e-commerce. And I'm going to tell you what annoys me. And you guys are going to remember that because it's going to be a bonus question on a test probably. So who would like to be the first person to tell me something that really annoys them? What annoys you, Sean?
When I'm trying to watch a movie and like my roommates are just talking. Or like I'm just really invested in a TV show, but they're sitting with me, but they're not as invested. They just keep having a conversation. And just try to
When did you get married? Yeah, TV is never the same. Trust me on this. So I agree. What's something that annoys you, Brady? Driving too close to the line? Yeah, that is.
Whenever they're like next to you for too long, you're past it.
I can get behind your annoyance. What annoys you? Trying to limit it. Spike annoys you? Who's Spike?
You probably know him. Jonathan Lee.
Oh, Spike's his nickname. I didn't know that was his nickname.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. So, hey, John, if you're listening to this, you annoy some people. Yes.
I get annoyed by slow walkers.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty slow.
It's worse when the old folks are toddlers because they have no concept of personal space. An old person or a toddler will take up as much space as you allow them. You know what I'm talking about. Yes, what annoys you?
Probably like when I'm driving on Mater Drive, there's like somebody right behind me, on my tail the entire time. But like you're going like above the speed limit. It is so frustrating. And people just like get right behind you, and then like they're on your tail the entire time. But like it's not like you're going slow. Like you're going like 10 miles per hour.
That immediately makes me go slower when somebody does that to me. All of a sudden, I got nowhere to be when somebody wants to be up my tail. Yeah, absolutely. What annoys you?
Probably the thing that annoys me most is like when people don't wear headphones. Like I don't want to hear your Snapchats. Yeah, public FaceTime is the worst. Especially if it's when you're in line and it's a conversation.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's just pet peeve.
I'm probably talking about things that you don't want to hear about anyway. Yeah. Grace, what annoys you?
Whenever you hold the door for someone when you don't need to, like it's a long period of time, and they just don't say thank you.
Yeah. Screw those people. Screw them.
It's like, I just want to push them back and just close the door.
I do that sometimes. Joe, what annoys you?
When people drive really slowly in the left lane.
And they won't leave. stay over there forever. Yeah, I will drive ridiculously fast to get around to those folks. I'm with you. Brian, what annoys you?
I hate close walkers where if, like, you clearly have a destination and you're walking a straight line and then they walk really close next to you, so they kind of lean you away from it, and then you have to stop and go around to the other side and they lean you away to the right side. It's like, walk straight, dude.
These people are really annoying. All right, well, here's your bonus question annoyance from me. I hate when I'm at Planet Fitness and I'm getting onto this row of elliptical trainers and there's nobody else in the row, so I get on one right where I want to be. And when the next person comes in, they pick the one right next to me. Like, why? You get all this space. If they were full, that's okay. You don't need to be right here. There's this whole other row right here, and that annoys the crap. So, that being said, guys, because you were very diligent in being here today, we're going to end a little early, and I'm going to wish you a happy and safe break. Have a wonderful time.